Our guest today shares his story on how he was able to transition from a software engineer to a Senior AWS Solutions Architect. There are so many gems and lessons in this one that I am so excited for you to give it a listen. Welcome to Cloud Career Mentor. I am your host, Fayomi. On this show, we aim to inspire, educate, and motivate you to make the right moves to break into the cloud industry. If you are looking to get your first cloud job, I have created a free guide that I think you'll love. It's a proven blueprint that walks you through the 3 simple steps you can take to make you a more attractive candidate to potential employers. If this sounds interesting to you, the link for that is in the description. Now, all you need to do is sit back, relax, and enjoy the conversation. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the show. We have a very special guest today. He is a talented senior solutions architect who has worked in a variety of companies, including at Amazon itself in the AWS organization. He also put out really high quality videos on his YouTube channel called Alias in the Cloud, where he gives great insight into navigating the cloud industry. He adds a lot of value to the cloud community, and I'm really happy that he's come on this show today to share some of his knowledge and experience with us. Welcome to the show, Elias. How you doing?
Man, that was quite an introduction. Really humbled. Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah, it's all good. Thank you for having me.
No, this is going to be a really good session. So I can see, I looked on your LinkedIn and I've seen you worked at a variety of places, in very interesting positions in the cloud. Can you give us an overview of your cloud career, and then we'll dive into some details?
Yeah, for sure. I started looking at the cloud around 2010. I remember back then, cloud was mostly related to storing files. Like it was the birth of S3. S3 was like probably 3-4 years old at that point. And whenever we talked about the cloud, we talked about just storing files. We didn't have all these services like the compute services, the machine learning services, the functions that we have right now. I got involved back then. I was a full stack developer, and I was building applications, and we were looking at optimizing cost, and we loved the pay as you go model that the cloud offered at that point, even if it was only for storing files. So that was like my first, I would say, interaction with the cloud, a sort of glorified FTP service, right? And then as the time goes on and AWS was doing the heavy lifting, to be honest, to democratize the cloud, to introduce the cloud to the masses. And we started seeing these big companies like Netflix come into the cloud and writing these awesome blog posts teaching us and telling us how they were able to cut their cost 50% just by going to using S3. And we started seeing this wave, right? And I think AWS did a lot of work investing into these companies and providing them with support. So the cloud became sort of mainstream and more people started getting into it and more organizations started trust in it, right? Companies and organizations still wary about the cloud, and they think that you're uploading your files to the cloud provider, to a data center that you don't even know where it is. So that's risky. It's not risky at all, and we can talk about that if you want. So that was like one of the biggest hurdles to the cloud that I noticed and I lived through is companies not trusting these public cloud providers and companies thinking, I would rather have my service in-house, in my building, pay for the maintenance and pay for everything rather than give AWS or Google or Azure or all these cloud providers that came afterwards, rather than giving them my data. And so that was like the second thing that I witnessed after the democratization of the cloud. And then I think in the past few years, I had the chance to work a lot. Every company I worked with, I would say in the past 7-8 years, either directly or indirectly, have had some sort of workload deployed on the cloud, whether it's only to leverage storage, whether it's only to leverage Lambda functions, maybe to run some machine learning workloads. So it's becoming more and more, it's not cool anymore to be in the cloud. Now we expect you to be in the cloud. Like you have to be in the cloud. The argument of not running your workloads in the cloud is, I don't know, maybe there are some specific use cases where, for example, Let's look at a company like SpaceX, right? So you're building SpaceX, you're launching a rocket, and you are gathering billions of data, billions of metrics every second. And you need to analyze that kind of metrics, and you need to make decisions on whether to I don't know, justify the course 1 degree to the right, 1 degree to the left as the rocket is going up. So you need to make these calculations on board. So
Yeah.
yes, for that specific use case, I understand. You can't use the cloud. You can't afford to send data and then wait for latency. So there's some specific use cases there. Or maybe you're on the operating room and it's a life or death situation and you need to make some. But for 99.9999% of use cases, I think the cloud has become something that is equivalent to increased velocity,
Mm.
equivalent to cost reduction, equivalent to advancing and going quickly from idea to market. Probably diverged from your initial question. Feel free to let me know.
So I think it's an interesting point, when you talked about the history of the cloud, because I believe Amazon actually had a 7-year head start before anyone else sort of caught up. They were like, "Oh wow, this cloud thing there's something here." So, and yeah, that's why they're the
And you know
biggest
the
in the
story?
space. No, share it with us.
So Amazon was building this, they had this big project called merchant.com. So they wanted to bring all these big retailers in and allow them to sell, like Target, Costco. They wanted to build one platform for them and allow them to sell their products on Amazon. And actually, it was not called Amazon. At that time, Amazon was still focused on books. They were calling it merchant.com. And by doing, I mean, the projects failed. We don't have merchant.com anymore. But doing so, they had to build a lot of technology and invest a lot of money into building new technology. And when merchant.com failed, they were like, well, you know what? Maybe we could sell this technology to others. And that's the whole story of AWS, of how Amazon Web Services started. And you see it to this day. Some services are prefixed with Amazon and some services are prefixed with AWS. So SQS is Amazon SQS, but other services like AWS SNS, AWS Simple Service, you will
Yeah.
notice there are, and the ones that are prefixed with Amazon were built back for Amazon. And then when AWS became an organization in itself, then the new services are now all of them prefixed with AWS. So the old services like EC2, like SQS, are Amazon Compute Service, right? It's not AWS Compute Service.
Yeah, that's interesting. Like I didn't know that story. So, we all learn something new every day. So thanks for sharing. Let's go all the way back to, before you go into the cloud. I know your background is sort of you're a software developer. How did you actually get into the technical world? What were you doing before you made that transition? And how did that journey go?
I've had, I would say, the most standard courses. I did my high school degree, then jumped on an engineering school, computer science school, did that for 4 years. And I then got my master's degree in computer science, distributed systems, then did my internship in a web development agency. And so I had the standard path to becoming a software engineer. And then I think luck plays a big part of it in a way that I was lucky enough to have joined an organization where early enough where the directors and upper management were visionary enough to say, we want to use the cloud for this company going forward. And so that was my involvement with it from the beginning. I could have easily joined the startup who said, no, we're just going to go all in, no need to go to the cloud, we're just going to do this, or we're just going to do that. I think luck plays a big part, and we don't give it much credit. And then after that, once I saw how working in the cloud helped me not only learn faster, but also grow. I was not focused, like as a software engineer, I was able to deliver features quickly because I was focused. The example I like to give right now, we've gone a long way since that days. But when I'm talking, for example, about serverless functions, the example I like to give is imagine being a cook in a self-cleaning kitchen, right? You're a cook and you only focus on cooking, and everything, all the dishes, everything else self-cleaned. You don't have to manage the infrastructure. You only focus on what you want. And so that helped me a lot. And after that, I would make the choice, when I had a few years of experience under my belt, and when I wanted to choose an organization to work with, I always gave more priority to ones who have a cloud strategy, which means that even if they are not on the cloud right now, at least they are thinking about it. And so I could see myself helping them go into the cloud or leveraging what they have currently in the cloud and building on top of it.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think there's a couple of really interesting points there because, you mentioned that you come from a software background. That was kind of your track. And you'd be surprised how many software engineers don't understand the cloud. I think a lot of the times because there's maybe a DevOps team that deals with that. But this is something, I guess this is a drum beat I'm beginning to sound a little bit where, if you're working as a software engineer, that doesn't mean that's all you have to work on. There's so many benefits to at least understanding how the cloud works, doing a couple of projects, and just having the dialogue around, oh, what is this cloud and how do I experiment? Because it just opens up a lot of opportunities, like what you were saying with the serverless piece and understanding that. So yeah, I guess don't take it for granted that you come from a software background. And the other thing as well is you mentioned that when you made that you were also willing to learn new things. I feel like a lot of the time once we have a skill, like we're a programmer, we just want to focus on that skill. We almost get tunnel vision, and I see this with people who are in the cloud industry as well. Like they're like, oh, I just want to know like AWS, not really realizing that maybe they need to learn a bit more about programming as well. So I think, yeah, that ability to sort of look at what you're doing and try to see the bigger picture in it. I think that's really important because you don't have to be an expert in the other thing, but you need to at least play around with it, understand it a little bit more. And even if you don't plan to make the full shift to it, it still helps you in your career. So if you're a software developer, you learn the cloud, you don't have to become a cloud engineer, but it will definitely help you in your software. So that's just some of the points I wanted to pull out of what you were
I
saying, because I
agree.
think that was
I,
important.
I agree 100%. I mean, like getting that tunnel vision and becoming the world most expert in something, that has its virtues, right? Imagine you're doing a PhD on protein folding or something like that. You want to become the world most expert in that specific thing. But the thing is, once you're taken outside of of that specific domain, then you struggle. I've worked with a lot of organizations when I was a part of AWS, and some of them were organizations that do research and development. And the common theme I hear is they are so happy when they interview someone or they work with someone or they hire someone who has not only engineering knowledge, but also business knowledge, but also soft skills, but also presentation skills. Because they say that in academia, there are brilliant people all over, but they sort of focus entirely on the research they do and they neglect everything that's going around that. I read somewhere someone said that a human being should be able to change a tire, cook a meal, and
Yeah.
they gave a list of a lot of things, and they said like you have to do, you can't just be specialized somewhere in something. The other
Yeah.
point is you become what we call you have the experts beginner syndrome. So imagine you spend 10 years focused on a framework, Spring Boot, Laravel, Node.js, Express, whatever. The thing is, the world is advancing by you, right? And you are focused on your thing. So you become an expert in your thing, but you're a beginner in the grand scheme of things because you didn't follow up what's happening. I think we agree on that is mandatory to everyone who writes code, builds products, ships code, tests code, tests application and ship them and all that things. Because even if you don't write code and push it to the cloud yourself, you probably are managing a team who does that. Or probably, your security team are using third party or software that is running on the cloud. So you have to be aware of how the cloud works. And that's why when you look at certifications, we can, talk also about certifications later. When you look at certifications, they touch multiple fields. There are certifications like the cloud practitioner for AWS that it's specifically built for, I would say, managers, people who don't write code themselves, but they need to be familiar with the pay-as-you-go model of the cloud, with how cloud scales, with how the cloud secures. So you can take these right decisions when the time comes in.
Yes, and to even add on to that point, I think one's ability to learn new things and keep expanding is necessary for growth in whatever industry. So if I take an example of like a cloud engineer or whatever, like when you're starting, you're learning the basics, maybe you're doing a couple of projects, you might do one or two certifications, but then, once you get that job and you then actually start working in the real world, you realize that there's so much more to learn. And I always see that certifications become more valuable after you get a job than before you get a job. Because after you get the job, depending on where you're working, if you're working in a consultancy or a company, now you're starting to find different projects. You need to know what tool to use for what job. And that's where the certifications comes in, because you know, okay, if I need this type of database, maybe it's a NoSQL, okay, I know DynamoDB. If it's a time stream data, use, Amazon's time stream database. So you can become more nuanced in your approach to know what tool to use. But then as you become even more senior, I think your communication skills comes more into the fore. I mean, all of these are important at every stage, but as you become more senior, now you're communicating with CEOs and CTOs and developers. You're communicating with different kinds of people. You're writing documentation. And so now you need to upgrade those skills. So, if you're the kind of person that isn't constantly looking around like, okay, what can I do to improve myself? Then it will be really difficult to sort of rise up in any industry, really, not to mention the cloud one.
Oh, for sure, for sure. The communication aspect, the curiosity aspect, the learning, that thirst for learning, like these go hand in hand. You can be the smartest person in the building and want to focus on solving problems in front of your computer, and that's fine also. Like, that's not, but when you bring a little bit of this, a little bit of that, it builds you into, I would say, between air quotes, a complete a software engineer who's able to not only implement the stories they are given, but think outside of the box, negotiate requirements, think about testing, think about how this application or this feature will be deployed, think about security risks and things like that. If you treat programmers as programmers, that's what they will always do.
Yeah.
But if you build solution engineers, not only people who, or if you want to build yourself into a solution engineer, there's a couple of things that you need to add into what you learn at school,
Yes.
or into what a framework provides you.
That brings us nicely into my next question, because I think you've spoken a lot theoretically in a way. I think what would be good is if you could give some examples of your journey from, okay, you first start working into the cloud, let's say you're junior, you're just learning. How did your roles and responsibilities change from like a junior, this is what I'm doing, mid-level, okay, this is what I'm doing, and then, senior, this is what I'm doing. So I think our listeners will find that very useful.
Beautiful. Yeah. For me, I look at them, the big differences, I think there are two or three. The first big difference is in terms of time span. When you are a junior, you're thinking about implementing the feature in front of you. You're thinking about, so your time span or your future is limited to maybe 2 days, 3 days, right? Then as you go intermediate, senior, now you're thinking more about 2 months, 3 months. Now you're not only thinking about implementing the feature in front of you, but how to integrate it with what others are building. And you're thinking about how it will be deployed, how it will be monitored. So like you expand a little bit your time span is not the right word, just using it for the lack of a better word, but
Yeah.
you're like time awareness,
Your time
right?
horizon. Yeah.
Time horizon. Thank you.
Yes.
That's what I was looking for. Um, then you grow up, you become a tech lead, and now you are involved in meetings with stakeholders, with business, and now you're discussing plans for this quarter, for the next year. So your time horizon gets a little bit larger. Now you're thinking more ahead. Um, and then, the higher you get, as a solutions architect, for example, I'm thinking about 5 years, 10 years. And I tell my people, building something that works is easy. Everyone can do it. You can go to the internet and clone a framework, use WordPress, I can build you anything you want in WordPress, right? That's easy. The thing that is a little bit harder is building something that could scale. It's building something that is fault tolerant. It's building something that is highly available. It's building something that is secure. That's where your time horizon needs to increase. But then, you know what? The hardest thing ever is building something that is maintainable for decades. And in software engineering, we talk a lot about interfaces, how we use interfaces. Two components communicate between each other and exchange information. We've even invented technologies and languages like JSON. So it's a language that allows multiple components to exchange data between each other. So I think when you start as a junior, you don't think about all these things. Your time horizon is limited. And you know what? It's not necessarily bad because you're still learning the craft, you're still adapting, and you're not only learning the technology, you're also learning the organization. You're learning the politics that goes in a company. You're learning how to deal with your colleagues, superiors, how to respond to emails the right way. You are learning what it takes to be a professional. We no one teaches us how to be. Being professional, for example, means for me at least, never get angry. Nothing. You shouldn't let your emotions show. Everything is professional. Or, for example, leave nothing to chance. That's something that the schools don't teach us, right? So you're learning what it means to be a professional and work in a professional environment, and active listening and negotiating requirements. So you get that, and so you focus only on the tasks that you are given. But as you advance in the role, your time horizon expands. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, and it goes also hand in hand with time horizon, is your area, your blast radius, the impact that you make. Again, when you start as a junior, your impact is very limited. You are solving problems that you can solve probably in a day or two, small things here and there, fix this here, fix this there. But as you advance in your career, your impact becomes harder and harder and larger, and your decisions have now, I don't know, think about Jeff Bezos when he was CEO of Amazon. Like, he makes one decision and it impacts the whole world. Or Elon Musk right now. So your impact, your blast radius. And that's why when I work with teams, I don't want my seniors or my technical leads, I try my hard not to have them write code. For me, your impact, if you write code, your impact is like that code that you wrote, that feature. But imagine if you can coach 5 people in the team and mentor them and show them the right way to approach the problem. Now your impact is times 5, is multiplicated. Imagine if you can review the code of others, you can write good documentation that's 2 teams, 3 teams, 10 years later, even if you're not in the company, people
They can
still
still
read them. Your
refer to
impact,
that. Yeah.
exactly. So I think that the higher you advance, you should get a little bit away from writing code and more into coaching and mentorship and decision making. And when I was in school, we used to say we all want to write code so we don't have to write code later. we all want to learn how to write code the best way possible so we don't write code later. And doesn't mean we've just become managers or product owners or whatever, but it means our impact is like we can look at the code. You know how the anecdote we gave, someone walk by 2 people playing chess, and then one look at it and he says, check or mate in 2, right? So we all want to work hard and develop that instinct and learn all these patterns so that we could, someone can spend 3 days blocks on a bug, but you could just look at it and say, oh yeah, I remember this, and you could do this and you could do that. So I think that's the 2 things that I look at it. And those were the 2 things that I always tried to improve in my personal experience. Like, I did front-end development, back-end development, I did QA testing. a tech lead. I got, the natural evolution to a tech lead. I managed the team. I was a director of engineering. I pretty much wanted to put myself in all these shoes so I can learn the craft around it. So at some point, I'll be able to advise and I'll be able to help, and increase that impact and increase that time horizon.
Yes, no, I definitely agree. And yeah, I have a couple of points to even add to that. I really liked your point where you said, you've done front end, you've done back end, you've done all these things. Because if you're working in the cloud is kind of like the culmination of all of these skills. So for me, I learned how to program. I built web apps, for side projects and all of that. And what I found was that by building these side projects, it helped me to become a better cloud engineer because now I could speak the language of the developers. I could understand how the database connected to the application, and it just gave me a wider perspective. Because sometimes people are like, "Oh, do I need to learn programming?" I'm like, yes, if you want to, if you, I mean, it's not strictly necessary because I know there
Yeah.
are cloud jobs where, you're just clicking around in a console. But if you want to get yourself to that next level, then you need to understand how applications work. Ideally, you'd have built one yourself. Doesn't have to be anything fancy, but you need to understand, APIs and things like that. But also another thing I wanted to expand on as well was when you mentioned about, the differences between junior and senior. And I think junior engineers don't appreciate senior engineers enough. I know when I was a junior, I didn't because, you
I
do a
get
couple
it.
of tasks, you close a couple of tickets and you start to feel good about yourself. And you're like, what are these seniors doing? I can do that. But the reason, the
I get
reason
it.
you think that is because
Yeah,
they're shielding you from all
exactly.
the meetings, all the decisions. So by the time it gets to you, the work's already done. All you have to do is, do some Google search, stitch
Yeah.
together some things from Stack Overflow, and you're good to
Yeah, the
go.
architecture is done, the discovery is done, the
It's
requirements
done.
are done. Yeah.
Everything is done, and yeah, you just walk in like, oh, this stuff is easy. Why are they paying them 100 grand for whatever? So I just thought, yeah, I'd highlight those 2 points. No, thanks for sharing those. So, you've done a lot in your career, like you mentioned, front end, back end, cloud, team lead, all of that. What actions or attributes do you think have helped you the most in your career?
I think we all have unfair advantages. Like we all have things that differentiate us from others. And you gotta find that thing, man. You gotta find your unfair advantage and you gotta squeeze every last bit of it. I think for me, it's obsession. I easily get obsessed about something. And
Mm,
so you give me, I don't know, the first time ever I know what a computer is, I got obsessed about it to the point where I would spend nights reading, in Windows, when the help feature in Windows, you just
yes.
describe all the feature. I
Yeah.
would just spend hours reading those features, what they do. Imagine like being 12 years old and just reading documentation about
Wowee.
what the OS works.
I mean, I was
It was
watching cartoons at that time, so I wouldn't know.
same, same. It's just, and then when I discovered what the cloud is, for example, it would become an obsession for me, and I would just dive into it, read everything about it, try to build with it, and to this day, stop myself from being obsessed because I can't afford it anymore. I would see a new, like for example, Rust. You know how Rust is gaining,
Yeah.
is becoming more popular. I
That's
found
a
myself.
programming language for those who might not know. Yeah.
Exactly. It's the programming language for the cool kids. And I found myself, it's 3 a.m. and I'm doing stuff with Rust. I'm like, I don't have any professional need for this. I don't have any
Yeah.
personal
Yeah.
need for this. It's not, why am I doing this? But it's
Mm.
just an obsession for me. And I can easily dive into something for weeks
Yeah.
and just get that thing. And then I'm able to just, pull back. And with experience and with age, I'm old now, so I can say this. And with age, you can take a little bit of what you learned here and what you learned here and what you learned there. The other thing
Mm.
is, when I was growing up and when I was like learning the craft of software engineering, I would just never say no to any feature, to any user story, to any task, even if I know nothing about it. If something gets assigned to me, I'll say, okay, I'll do it. I'll take care of it. and then I'll try to figure out how. And by doing so, you learn also a couple of things about time boxing and about how to solve problems and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, but for me, it was just ability to focus, which I think we are losing. And myself, I'm started to lose with, more responsibilities
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
here and there. I don't spend time focusing as much as I used to or as much as I would like to. We could all hate on how social media gets but you know what? We give it our focus and we give it our time at the end of the day. And so I think it's just what helped me a lot is the ability to focus at one thing at a time, and then to just be willing to fail. Never say no. Just give it a try. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work.
I really like what you said about having figuring out what your unfair advantage is and then sort of going with that. Because I recently wrote a LinkedIn post about this, and what I realized was that my unfair advantage is a bias for action. Like, I don't think about things too deeply. I'm like, let's just get started. We'll figure it out as
Got
we
it.
go. And
We're the same.
what helped me with that was, I've done a lot of things in my life. In a previous life, I was a photographer slash videographer. I've dabbled in different things. I've done different things. And the reason I've been able to do those things is because my mindset is that the first 5 to 10 times I do something, it's going to be garbage, and that's okay, because that takes a lot of the pressure off. Because sometimes if you think, oh, it needs to be perfect, it needs to be this, it stops you from actually taking action. And so for me, by having that mindset of, it's going to be garbage, that's fine, but the 11th time I do it, it's going to start getting good,
There you go. But you
and
know what?
then, yeah,
You are willing to do it for 11 times.
yeah,
And because you also believe, you say that, oh, this is just engineering. Engineering is about iterations. It's not, Elon Musk cannot go to Mars in the first
in the
try.
first
It just
rocket,
doesn't
yeah,
work that way. So,
yeah,
so yeah, you have to keep doing it again and again and again and again. So you need to be comfortable
yeah,
with failing for a few times,
yeah,
and because you know that at 11 times it will be good. I remember, like, when I was younger and single, and I wanted to approach a girl, for example, at a bar or at a party. It's exactly what you said. If you start overthinking what I'm gonna tell her, what I'm gonna say, how I'm gonna
the
open,
opportunity is going to go.
it's gone. Your heart rate starts going up, and then you
Yeah,
just starts finding excuses. No, I'm not good. No, it's not the right time. No, and but the best thing I learned to do is I would just go directly to that girl and say, hey, I know the first thing that's gonna come out of my mouth is gonna
yeah,
be blah. It's gonna
yeah,
be just BS. So, hi, how are you? Just keep it simple. So the bias for action is a highly undervalued skill. The ability to just say, I have this idea. I can see the vision. I know where I want to go. I don't know how I'm going to get there, but you know what? I'll figure it out along the way. And if I fail, I'll do it again, and I'll learn, and then
you
I'll
learn
do it again.
along, yeah, iterative. And if you're listening to this now and you've been wanting to learn the Linux command line, as soon as this episode's done, just start typing. Just start doing it, because there's no time like the present, really. There's no time like the present. Oh, another thing you said that I want to pick up on as well was just taking any task that's given to you. I think that's what helps you go from a junior developer to mid level. Because for me, I was like, any task, like if someone didn't want to do it, or it was too boring, or it was too difficult, I'd immediately volunteer myself for it. Because what that does is, that makes your team look at you different, because, it shows you're a team player, you're willing to put in the work, you're not shy of doing the work. So they respect you more. But also, B, you get to go out of your comfort zone, because you're doing work you've never done before, or it's too challenging, or it's too weird. And that's the way you actually learn, by doing things you haven't done before. So yeah, I think that's a really good tip. Definitely, if you're in a situation where it's something new, just volunteer for it and make it happen, for sure.
If you're a junior listening to this, know that someone who raises their hand and say, I can take care of this, that someone ultimately, like, instantly they raise in the ranks. Like, someone, when you look at someone and say, that you have someone in your team who you can delegate something to them and trust that they will make it happen, that's a very valuable skill. And all like upper managements, they see it, they notice it. So work on that.
Yeah, and because I was on LinkedIn the other day, and there was this clip of Barack Obama, and you've probably seen it. They asked him, like, what advice do you have to young people? And he basically said, you want to be that person that says, "I'll handle that." You know.
Oh, there you go.
So if
Yeah.
you're a senior, who's going to like, "I'll handle that," because if you can make someone else's life easier, they'll notice and they'll appreciate it. So that was a really good tip. Thanks for bringing that up. The next question I have is, what is one positive thing and one negative thing about working in the cloud industry?
Oh, the negative thing is easy. It's keeping up. It's in software engineering, as we say in IT, staying put is actually going backward. Staying put is not just staying put. There are 200 services plus in AWS right now, and you can't be an expert in all of them. And by the time you get you study them all and you become an expert in all of them, you can bet there will be more other 200 services more. So keeping up with everything is really tough. During my time at AWS, we had to, as solutions architect, we had to attend training every week, at least like 3-4 hours training every week, because you're
Wow.
working directly with these service teams like the EC2 team, the Lambda team, and you need to learn the new features that they build and they're ready before you can use them to advise your customers and build. So we're constantly learning, constantly trying to learn. Depends how you see it. It is exhausting, but it also gives you like a compression. It squeezes like maybe, I don't know, 5 years of knowledge and you get it under 1 year or something like that. Andy Jassy is famous by saying a quote. He says, there's no compression algorithm for experience, right? If something takes 10 years to learn, experience of 10 years, you can't compress 10 years of experience in a shorter amount. I sometimes tend to disagree with that, because what you're doing, what creators do, is exactly that: is you take your 10 years of experience and you try to get just the gist of it and provide it to someone under, maybe an hour, 30 minutes, 5 minutes, a couple in a series of videos. So I think that learning, coaching, teaching, that's a great way to compress experience. So, but going back to your question, yes, the negative thing is tough. It's tough to keep up. Also has maybe, it still looks like an alien concept to some people. I still remember myself when I started hearing about the cloud. I was like, even the term was weird for me. Like, why do we even call it cloud, right? And so it's still alien to people, and especially if you go try to explain some higher level functions like Lambda functions, kinesis, and stuff like that, it takes some foundation and knowledge before you get there. Now, the positive about the cloud is everything else. is just pick a position. Let's say you are a CEO and you're building a startup. So it's allowing you to cut costs. It allowing you to meet your customers wherever they are, all over the world. You have customers in India, you just click a couple of buttons and you deploy your solutions in India. Now you reduce latency. They don't have to go all across the world. You can approach these cloud providers and they will provide you with credits. They will provide you with coaching. They will provide, let's say you are a software engineer. Well, the advantages of the cloud is you're able to deploy secure, like imagine you're building a Lambda function, and Lambda itself takes care of scalability for you. It takes care of the whole ops management for you, managing the infrastructure. It takes care of, like, one of the hardest thing if you're using Kafka is to build consumers and producers and connect them and keep track of every message so you don't have to reread them. No, if you use Kinesis and Lambda, they just, like, it's
It
built
just
in. They
works.
just it just works. So if you're a software developer, then you get the benefit and the luxury of focusing on solving your business problem rather than doing the tasks, and especially that these tasks are repetitive, like it's this building CI/CD pipeline, securing this, implementing OWASP stuff. Like these things are stuff that we do every time for every application. So if the cloud can take care of these and free us, to focus on solving our problems, that's a big thing. If you are a product manager or a product owner, then again, it allows you to iterate faster. Your velocity goes higher. You're delivering more solid products that are not only secure 100%, but just the AWS shared security model is a big step towards security in all products. So I think for me it's a non-brainer that everyone who is close to writing application, like building products, building software, shipping software, testing software, releasing software, should have a knowledge of the cloud and should know how the cloud works. And after that, like recently, we're talking a lot about the whole FinOps culture, right? We have spend, we have budgets, we have all these things. How can we use the cloud to, this is not going to reduce the quality of our application. We just want to reduce the cost, but then keep the same quality or even better quality. So the whole FinOps culture and FinOps movement is gaining traction, and it's bringing people from finance background, into the cloud. So the cloud keeps opening up on, it's not only software engineers. At some point, there was only software engineers, but then it became machine learning engineers. It became AI engineers, and now we're opening it onto finance specialists and finance engineers. So
Cloud
more
is
and more,
eating the world.
it is. It is. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. The final question before we wrap up is always, what advice would you give to someone who's looking to start a cloud career in today? Because I'm sure it looks very different from when, you and I were starting a couple of years ago. So what advice would you give to that person?
You know how in management, usually we learn management from our managers. There's no really school that you go and learn how to become a manager. You learn from your experience by from people who managed you. I think if you are in a position where you have the opportunity to learn from professionals either within your organization, or even if you have the chance to change the company you're working for and go to a place where you can learn the cloud from experts, I think that would be the best thing you could do. As we mentioned, certifications are awesome, but you shouldn't only rely on certifications. You shouldn't use certifications to learn. You should use certification to validate the knowledge that you already acquired. Like, you've been writing, I don't know, deploying and building stuff on the cloud for 2 years, 3 years, you learned a lot of stuff. Now you say, okay, now I'm ready to get a solutions architect, associate or professional certified, because to validate the knowledge and experience that I got. So I think learning by experience, learning from experts. So finding like a mentor, finding someone you could follow and someone you could learn from, and someone who's able to squeeze that knowledge that they gained, throughout decades and provide it to you in a way that you could consume it and get the gist of it. You could either learn from history by doing or something like that. It's like you either look at what someone else did and learn from them, or you have to do it the hard way. You make the mistake and then you learn. And of course, you want to learn from history. So I think
Yes.
if you want to get into the cloud or grow in the cloud, you want to make strategic decisions onto which organization you want to work with. You can take all the boot camps in the world and take all the courses in the world, but you want to be in a place where stuff happens. Like, if I was 18 years old, I would do everything I could to go to Silicon Valley, for example, because that's where building startups happens. And imagine you join a company and then next to you is someone who 5 years later built Instagram, or I don't know, the
Yeah,
discussions
yeah.
that goes there, how you think about how you solve problems. So learning, as human beings, we say that it takes a village to coach child. Like, it takes a village to teach one person, one child. So you shouldn't underestimate the value that you will get if you are put in the right team, learning from experts and being, and like, choose the people you hang out with, the people you interact with, start projects open source, contribute to projects open source. All this is putting you in that position where you are learning from experts, right? next to you, do workshops, stuff like that. So I think that would be the most important thing I would say, because you will be able to squeeze because you could take a path for yourself and read books. Books are awesome, sure. But I think learning, like sitting next to someone who has 20 years in something and just listening to them and getting advice is gonna give you more knowledge than reading 1,500 books. I don't know, especially books there's a lot of fluff in them.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. And I
Yeah.
think, yeah, the crux of what you're saying is, if you want to break into the cloud industry, if you're in the cloud industry and you want to advance, do projects and use certifications to validate your knowledge, as opposed to using certifications as the knowledge. And B, find a community of sorts where things are happening. So a community with, experts in there, or with other people who are like trying to make it happen. Because I find that, yeah, you could just rob ideas off each other, and you learn more and you learn quicker. So I think those are really, really valuable. I mean, Elias, you've shared a lot of gems in this episode. People want to connect with you. Where do you point them towards? Where can they go to find out more?
Awesome. Yeah, thank you. I want to talk to your listener about WinTheCloud community. It's a community that I started, and it has professionals, cloud professionals, and cloud enthusiasts. So there's people from there are students who are trying to break into the cloud, but there's also veterans. There are people who currently are working at AWS, at Azure as cloud engineers and cloud architects. So that's a community where we meet, and we share. Books that we are reading. We ask questions also. It's like a forum also where people ask questions when they are blocked. People can find me also on LinkedIn, Ilyas Bakush. That's pretty much where I am, where I post. It's either LinkedIn, on the community, or you can find me on my YouTube channel, Ilyas in the Cloud. I trust the links will be shared in the notes. And yeah, man, that was awesome. I really enjoyed the conversation, and I would love to hang out again if the opportunity arises in the future.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, I'll put all the links in the show notes. Go check out all his stuff. Thanks for coming, Elias, and we'll talk soon.
All right, my friend. Have a good
Bye.
one.